Welcome everybody to Parent University. This is the fall series 21-22. We are recording this for you to be able to watch it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, like we said in the past, in our previous recordings, you can always click the link that we're going to be posting underneath our video, where you can ask questions for Dr. Appel or ourselves here at State and Federal, and we will answer those on our Parent University website. We will post the answers there. If you are watching this live and not in a recording, you can always put your questions on the chat, and we will answer those at the end of the session. Um, just to let you know that as well, that for everybody who has been here with us since the beginning of these sessions, which we're at number 7 now, that at the end of session number 8, we will be sending out an email just to confirm your participation so that you can receive a certificate from UCSD and here State and Federal, showing that you were a participant at Parent University for the fall semester. And we have today, once again, Dr. Morgan Appel from UCSD Extensions. Thank you very much, Dr. Appel, for being here.
No, thank you. I cannot believe it. It's been 7 of 8 sessions already. Oh, the time seems to fly. It's absolutely amazing. So I definitely would encourage, and thank you, Mr. Dominguez. I would definitely encourage all of you who have participated either live or online, make sure to let state and federal programs know, because we'd love to issue a certificate to you, very much well-earned and very much well-deserved. And as always, I want to start out by thanking you all. I understand that especially as the holidays are creeping up, or they are already here, taking an hour out of your day is a lot to ask. And even if you are watching this later on, it still takes time. So I want to thank you for inviting me into your homes and hopefully your hearts, and great to have you at this penultimate session, which is what we call Open Ocean Adventures and the Return to Ithaca. And this really talks about some of the things that you can do to support your students in the first 2 years of college, or the first gap year, or their first year on the job. And when we talk about Ithaca, you may remember we talked about the Ithaca in terms of Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey. And Ithaca in that story really means home. So we are really talking about here a home with you, but also a home on campus, feeling at home at whatever we do post-high school. And we know that that is not necessarily an easy thing to do. So we'll look at how we can help our students thrive and keep connected. As always, whatever we do here at Parent University is going to be connected to heart, head, and hands, but more specifically in the intersection between heart, head, and hands, and where you see that is high performance. Now, when we're talking about getting into college or pursuing a gap year or early career, we're talking a lot about academic performance, and that's the stock and trade of schools. But we're also really talking about developing a love of learning and cultivation of essential skills and service to others. And you will find that as your son or daughter moves forward in life, these qualities and these characteristics and these factors are going to be ever more important. So we want to make sure that everything that we do is there and connected. And thus far, it has been quite an adventure. And I'm going to take you back to the very first session of the fall, where we looked at the cognitive, socio-emotional, metacognitive characteristics of learners as a basis to understand where we've been, where we are, where we're going. So we did a bit of a review, and we moved forward to look at the plenitude of post-secondary opportunities and options open to learners, what is required and when to start and how to choose. In some cases, that may be an internship or a gap year experience, a community college, a tech or trade school, or a university. But we looked at all of the options that are available and went about a process by which we thought about how we could best choose based on what we know about the cognitive, affective, and metacognitive. and moved on to things like admissions and testing and applications and grades, financial aid, things like that. And now we are going to look at the first 2 years. And I will tell you that application to anything, whether it's a job application or an application to college or for a gap year experience, it's not easy. It's like a job. And I think because it requires a lot of time and it requires a lot of energy, you really make the difference as an extra set of hands. Now, before we continue in earnest, as always, I have a institution behind me. I'm going to ask you to guess the institution and win a fabulous prize from UC San Diego. And for those of you who are expecting prizes, they are coming. We just got in a shipment of great swag that we are going to distribute to you. But I am going to have you guess what is behind me, the institution behind me, guess it and win a prize. Make sure you include it in the chat. But let's talk about your significance as parents. And I know that my parents, when I went off to school or even to community college, they sort of felt as though they were perhaps not as important anymore, that I was asserting my own independence and I was finding my own way. But that is not what the research tells us. In fact, if we review the variety of studies on college performance or performance generally, what we find is that interaction and support from family members and peers are among the most important processes for adolescents and young adults, and they play an important role in academic outcomes and are better measures of cognitive skills and success than things like the SAT, which we know from our last sessions. There are a lot of concerns about the SAT as a predictor of success. But what we find is that continued support from family is incredibly important. And we'll take a look at that, at the reasons behind that. And we'll take a look specifically at what you can do in the first 2 years as your adolescent transitions into young adulthood. Now, just a bit of a review from what we've done last time. Last time we talked a lot about the college essay or statement of purpose. And this is also going to be very much reflected in what we do in our first 2 years, whether we're at a community college, a tech school, a university, or another environment, that you really want to make sure that you are presenting your best self in writing, no matter where you are going. And we need to be able to be there for our sons and our daughters, and we need to be able to be there to help them find the spark within. So writing about something that is important to you. If you're disconnected from something, it's very hard to be able to write about it or communicate about it with any passion. And again, we always talk about being reflective. And I can tell you, having sat on interview committees for jobs, reviewing resumes and curriculum vitae or college applications, it's easy for me to tell what you have done in a chronological order, but the impact that it has upon you and how it helps you grow as a person or open your eyes or change your perspectives is not readily apparent. So anytime you are engaged in the process, it's important not only to list what you've done, and you have other places on an application to do that, but how it impacted you. We always talk about being mindful of humor. Now, we may be a great sage on stage at home and have a wonderful open mic night and keep the family laughing all the time. Not everybody sees things the same way. So even subtle humor can derail an application. Sometimes it's hard to communicate humor without use of body language. So just be mindful of that. And again, avoid contradictions and repeats. So if there is something that's already in another part of the application, you don't have to repeat it unless you are talking about the impact that it had upon you. And certainly you want to avoid contradictions. So if you've said you've been doing something for 3 years in one part of the application, and in your statement you say, well, I've been doing it for 5, that's going to be noticed. So really a lot of this is being accurate. And one of the best ways that you can help your son or your daughter is to review these things for accuracy. You don't necessarily need to criticize their writing or how they come across, but just make sure that things are factual and make sure that things do not contradict. Again, it's important that you talk about yourself beyond test scores and grades. And it's very hard for our kids sometimes to identify those things that make them shine beyond their achievements and accomplishments. And we really have a tendency to push down from the university to say, well, it's all about grades, it's all about test scores, it's all about extracurriculars. So it is sometimes hard for our children to go and really take those things that distinguish themselves beyond that. Again, early impression, you don't have a lot of space to do this. So whether you are doing a job application or whether you are interviewing for an internship or interviewing for a gap year experience, you want to make sure that you make a good impression early on, open strong, and continue strong. Style matters, as does grammar. You know, our modern technology affords us opportunities to do grammar checks and spell checks. So be cognizant, be aware of how you are coming across. That is a great thing that parents can do, that they can sit, not necessarily proofread as an editor might, but really say, okay, it looks like you've missed a period, or this sentence goes on for years. I think you should break it up. Parents can also help kids stay focused, making sure that you don't wander off. It's easy when you're talking about yourself to drive all over the road. So you want to make sure that you stay focused, that if you're going to make a point, if you're going to make an argument, make it short, make it sweet. Be you, again, but be your best you. That's applications, that is statements of purpose, and that is interviews. If you're going to quote somebody, make sure you get the quote right. And I think we talked a little bit about this the last time. Don't just start writing. Now, certainly you can write if you're experiencing writer's block and you just want to sort of have a stream of consciousness and you just write. That's great. But think seriously about what's being asked. There is always something behind what's being asked. So, you know, don't wait till the last minute, write something and turn it in. Make sure you consider it. Again, this is like a job, and it's going to take energy, it's going to take time, and it's going to take effort. Now, of course, you know, your son or your daughter may come to you for help with editing or to say, hey, does this sound like me? Does this sound authentic? But your kid should have a team around. So they should be able to take an essay to a teacher or to a friend or to, you know, a peer for them. Again, it's not as though you can really do this all by yourself. You have to have a team. Here are, again, are some of the prompts that have been used for the common application. And they really talk about things that, like sharing your story. What have you learned? When you faced a challenge, how did you come back? And you know, admissions officers and others who read applications look to this to see how resilient you can be as you pursue post-secondary education. Or if you are an internship, you may recall in job interviews, you know, what is something that you've encountered that you had to address and change. Things like what brings you joy and what impact does it have upon you. So they're not asking necessarily for, you know, political opinions or specific dates and places, but really they're trying to gain insight into the person behind the application, because, you know, they want to make sure that this is a good match, which is the essence of college counseling. Same thing with interviews, as we've discussed before. Now, not all colleges or universities will require an interview. Not all gap year experiences will require an interview, but if you are going to be interviewed, it is usually going to be by you doing a formal interview, perhaps with a member of the faculty or a university administrator or a manager on the job, as well as an informal interview with somebody who may be a peer or an alumnus. So again, be yourself, be your best self, and practice. Practice interviewing. And parents, you can certainly be a great resource for that. You play the role of interviewer and you ask questions. Now, when you are interviewed, so if you're being interviewed by the University of Chicago, or if you are being interviewed by somebody like, a biotech firm, you want to bring non-standard questions. Those things that can be found on the website or in the corporate literature or the university brochure, that can be answered very easily. And it is not a good use of your time where you could say, well, you can just check the website. So make sure you bring non-standard probing and insightful questions. And that means doing research. Really get a feeling for what the place is like. Prepare yourself for common questions. Things like, why did you decide to apply here? Or where do you see yourself in a number of years? What are your other interests? Those kinds of things. If you have an answer prepared, at least in your mind, it is easier to respond. And make sure you are cognizant of time. This is not sort of a, take however long you like. They have a very set time period. And not only do they want to find out more about you, but they want to make sure that you're able to be sufficiently organized to get out your points. That means be specific, be concise, and always use examples. So if you're saying, I'm good at doing this, or my greatest aptitude or ability is X, make sure that you have an example upon which to draw. It will make you stand out. And of course, if your son or daughter is a little bit nervous, that makes all the sense in the world. And I think anybody who has done interviews accounts for that. That is part of a long time ago when we were talking about brain compatible learning. We talked about any sort of learning or any sort of interaction triggers the survival mechanism. And that can be the butterflies in the stomach and things like that. But interviewers do expect that. But again, help your kids bring their best selves to the table. Now, here's an issue. And I certainly don't want to, bring the mood of the room down. But if you're applying to a number of institutions or a number of jobs, there is certainly going to be a point of rejection. I have been rejected by some of the finest institutions in this country. And it does impact you emotionally, especially if you had your heart set on something. We talked early on about growth mindset. We talked early on about resilience. And this is a great time when your son or your daughter receives that first letter, that's the thin envelope versus the thick envelope, or the email, work with them to tap into growth mindset approaches. How do you bounce back from this? Understanding that this is nothing personal. Now, there's a limited amount of space, and but the admissions officers or the gap year consultants, it's nothing personal about you. And make sure that they celebrate the acceptance letters that they get. Embrace the schools that accepted them. What ifs, that is our tendency as people, because we are always trying to problem solve, and you know that from the brain compatible learning workshop. What ifs can waste a lot of time, and it can take a lot of energy and pull away from the things that are important. So, asking, well, what if I, use this example versus that example? I mean, doing a sort of debrief is fine, but you can go down a rabbit hole with what ifs. And it's important for your kids to understand that if they've been rejected, there are a whole host of amazing people that have also been rejected. And here are a few from colleges and universities across the country. So Isaac Asimov, very famous science fiction writer, was rejected from Columbia. Tom Hanks, Saving Private Ryan, Forrest Gump, we know his body of work, was rejected from MIT. Barack Obama, President of the United States, rejected from Swarthmore. Steven Spielberg, interestingly enough, rejected from film school at USC and UCLA. And he's done pretty well as far as films are concerned. And, there are alternatives. So if you don't get into the place that you want to go, there are other things that you can do. You can explore, for example, going to a community college, getting general education out of the way and transferring, engaging in a gap year experience. So it may feel immediately that it's the end of the world, but it really isn't. It's important to know that things do happen for a reason. Now, I'm going to offer a bit of caution in this age of social media. This is not a problem that existed when I was applying to colleges using quills and parchment. But because our kids are so engaged in social media, and, that's Facebook and Snapchat and whatever other platforms that they use, two-thirds, about 65% of admissions officers surveyed by Kaplan, they're the sort of test prep firm, in 2020 see no issue with social media being part of the admissions equation. So 65% of admissions officers thought it's not a bad idea to go and look what these kids are posting. And of those who say that they check social media, about 42% say that what they found has a positive impact on prospective students, up from 38% in 2019. Now, here's the part to be concerned. On the flip side, 58% say that what they found had a negative impact, up from 32%. So this is important. When we talked about social media many, many moons ago, we talked about the idea of these things being permanent and following you, across your life. So those things that you post will be seen. And this is not just admissions officers. We're talking about potential employers and others. So just a word of caution for those social media aficionados: think twice before you post it, especially things like opinions, especially things like pictures. So very, very important. If all goes well, and I am sure for your sons and daughters that it will, they may have to make a final decision. In other words, their cup will runneth over with opportunity, and they may be trying to make a decision between maybe 3 or 4 or 5 different institutions. And it may call for a revisit. So how do you make the final decision? Well, one of the ways you can do that is looking at fit beyond the tour and campus life. So most likely you've either been to a virtual tour or an actual tour, and you've seen the best of what the school has to offer. But at this time, it's time to look a little bit deeper. Can you imagine yourself here for 4 years? Can you imagine yourself within this gap year experience versus another? Think about extracurriculars. I don't mean are there extracurriculars, because every college and university, every other place has the extracurriculars. But the question is, so for example, if you are interested in sailing, or if you are interested in, ocean sailing, you probably would not want to go to a university in Kansas. You want to pay attention to debt. How much debt do you wind up having as a result? So of course, this is measured every year, but you want to have a better sense of it. You want to make sure that graduates of the institution are successful. So what happens to people after they graduate? Or what happens to people after they go through this internship? What is the likelihood that they will be employed? What are the transfer rates? What are the transfer rates for specific characteristics? It's also important to think about the core institutional values. This is not something that a lot of prospective students think of, but really what lies at the heart of the institution. So, for example, public institutions like UC San Diego are rooted in the Moral Act, which talks about not only research and teaching, but service to our communities. How does that sort of a mission resonate? Are they dedicated to things like access, dedicated to things like equity? So we want to make sure that their core values matches your core values and those of your kids. Now, all this being said, this is not a marriage. So no decision here is truly final. You are not wed to this particular institution for life. And you may find that you get somewhere and it's not what you expected, or there may be another place that you want to go. And certainly you can transfer, certainly you can switch jobs, certainly you can undertake different types of experiences. So nothing is set in stone. Now, one of the ways that's easy to do this is to really make comparisons on a spreadsheet with different types of characteristics and the things that you value. Now, you can certainly create your own spreadsheet, but there is a group called Road to College that will give you detailed information for up to 5 institutions for comparative purposes. So they line them up, and there are other templates that are available. So if you and your kid and your son or your daughter are making final decisions, where you can look at things side by side, and you can add your own things that are important to you, so you can make a good decision. And remember that this does take a little bit of time, but you do have to be, you need to be cognizant of time, because there are deadlines, as I think you all well know. So here we are. You find yourself accepted to different institutions. You made the tough decision about what you're going to do, whether you're going to a technical school or a gap year program. And for now, the hardest part is over. It is important that you make sure that you celebrate with everyone who made it possible. There may be a momentary flash of excitement, but this is a really big deal. So this is something that should involve family and friends, even pets who made sacrifices not being able to hang around with you or play with you or go for a walk. There has been a lot of sacrifices made, and it's really important to celebrate those milestones, because this is a momentous accomplishment. It is a huge thing. If you look at college admission statistics, you will be able to see that for yourself. And it's important, while we're celebrating everybody who made it possible, there is one person who really has a vested stake in this, and this is the person or people, depending on your household, who are going to embark upon the adventure of a lifetime. So we've made it out of the harbor. We're sailing towards open ocean. So now what do we do? We've made our decision. We've had a party. We're good. And here comes the summer rolling in. So what do we do? First of all, when you get admissions and financial aid offers, make sure that you review them carefully, and what the letters say matches what you believe you were offered. Make sure about the term to begin. I have known several students who were ready to go in fall, but admission had been deferred to spring. So even something like, when am I going to start, is a big thing. Is there special status? Are you an athlete? Are you a scholarship recipient? Just make sure that you review that carefully. And you can also look, if your financial aid package is not what it could be, there's always room for renegotiation. And I'm not going to say that this renegotiation is always positive, but there always is a bit of room. Make sure you formally accept the offer of admission using the processes outlined by the institution. So if the institution says, answer this email, fill in the box and click submit, then do that. Don't send them a handwritten letter, thanking them. Do what they ask you to do. And make sure that those offers you are declining, do so politely and do so promptly, because they will not know that you've accepted another offer unless you tell them and they've made an investment in your son or your daughter. Make sure that your sons and daughters set up email accounts and follow the institutions on social media, just to see what's going on, to gain a bit of added familiarity, to feel like part of the team. And be very careful of what they share and what they post. Just because you've been offered admission does not mean that that offer cannot be rescinded. And this goes to the point of what I call, well, what we used to call back in the 80s, senioritis, where all of the admissions letters have been sent out, everything has been signed, and now the grades start to slip. So be very aware that an admissions offer is not a permanent, it's not signed into law, it's not signed into code. These offers can and have been rescinded in the past. So make sure you take care of all of this. A lot of this is just process-based, but also very, very, very important. Now, as we look towards these next years, what's rising to the academic challenge or rising to the work challenge and things like that typically are not the things that are problems. And what we know from our look into socio-emotional development and our look into brain compatible learning, it's the change that makes a difference. Lives have been changed. Now you find that your adolescent kids are becoming young adults. They're still pretty much trying to find out who they are. They're going to be exposed to a number of different ideas and perspectives and philosophies, and they're still in a state of change. So again, these are kids who are probably not going to show you that they're worried, but it is a worry, and it is a worry for you. So it is a great adventure, but even adventures can be stressful. So it's really not the challenge, but the change that's important. Some other things that you want to make sure to do: sign up for placement tests and assessments as soon as you can, and prepare for them in as much as is possible. And that includes getting a good night's rest. Usually these tests don't have any impact on admissions decisions. So for example, if you don't place in advance this or advance that, the college is not going to say, well, we've made a mistake here, we're going to de-admit you. This is just to make sure that you're placed for the classes that you need. So again, part of what you do as a support system for your sons or daughters is to help them get ready for this. Make sure that they understand that it's important, and make sure that they get a good night's rest. There's going to be a lot of restless nights over the next 4 years or over the course of an internship. So it's important to at least get a good solid footing. Now, if you're going to a college, a university, a trade school, make sure that you sign up for orientations. Orientations are there for a reason, to really get you centered. You may be provided with a mentor. I remember as a transfer student to UC Irvine, even way back when in the late 1980s, we were assigned a mentor, and I did not take advantage of it as much as I could, but just knowing that I had a mentor there, somebody who I could ask a question, even if it was, how do I get from here to here, in time for class, was a great relief. Knowing that I had a team around me was important. arranging a bit of extra time to visit the campus is also something you want to do. That's the time to go to the bookstore. That's the time to kind of hang around and really feel a part. And that's not just for the student. That is for you. That is for siblings as well. Because we know, at least at UC San Diego, even if you're sending one student to our campus, the whole family goes. This is a family endeavor. Orientations, again, very important. Housing, meal plans, and medical record forms as per institutional processes. You want to make sure that the first day you have somewhere to go. If it is a place where you're going to be moving in, think about if the institution being attended is far from home, how are you going to get there? How long is it going to take? But you want to make sure that all of the paperwork is filled out and per the way that they do things. And you're going to start to get a lot of mail once accepted, especially if you're going to be living on campus. You'll get a lot of fun stuff, a lot of exciting stuff, but you'll also probably get things like invoices, move-in instructions, etc. And there are, a lot of people available on campus to help with that if people have questions. And it is a resource that is designed to be used. Now, I go back to the Odyssey. We talked about Ithaca being home, and I want to talk about adventure. And from the Odyssey, this quote, "And now tell me, and tell me true. Where have you been wandering, and in what countries have you traveled? Tell us of the people themselves and of the cities who were hostile, savage, and uncivilized, and who, on the other hand, hospitable and humane." And really, that's what we're talking about. When we talk about either going into a job or an internship or a gap year program, a trade school or a college, it really is a whole new world. And that whole new world requires a bit of adjustment. Now, when we talk to first-year students, now these are kids who are coming into college, or they've been there for a while, or they've whether it's community college, trade school, other places. These are the concerns that they've expressed. They may not tell you. Remember, they are still adolescents and they want to project an aura of being okay. Everything is fine. But here's some concerns, and it's good to be sort of vigilant about this. Feeling overwhelmed in many ways. When you go to a campus, it is like the world opens to you. There's so many things to do. There are classes and workshops and lectures and clubs and all sorts of things in which you can be engaged. There are new friends, new roommates, new people to meet, new schedules. And that can feel overwhelming. And even if everything is great and everything is exciting and everything is positive, it still can feel overwhelming. And again, it's important to know that one of the issues with post-secondary education, at least in colleges and universities, is that we often will ask kids to decide what they want to do with the rest of their lives before we open the door and show them all that they could be. So again, feeling overwhelmed is absolutely natural. And with guidance about resilience and some of the other things that we've discussed, you can help them work through that. Getting along with roommates, suite mates, and friendships. And I remember this very clearly from my first dorm, my first, second, and third dorm experience. Things may start off very smoothly, but these are new relationships to negotiate, and not all of us have the same sort of hygiene or cleanliness or respect. So that is always going to be on their minds. And when you are living in a dorm, no matter how beautiful they are on the outside, it is cramped quarters. Now, of course, with the pandemic, it's been a little bit less cramped because they're not cramming people in the same way that they've done before. But it is living in close quarters, and friendships and new friendships, meeting new people, especially if your son or daughter tends to be more introverted or isolated. Negotiating that can be a big thing. Relationships in general, socializing. nutrition, exercise, and sleep. Now, I have nieces and nephews who lived a very regimented life when they were in middle school and high school, and when they were sort of let off leash, as it were, when they came to college, they just sort of abandoned all of that, stayed up all night, partied quite a bit. You've heard perhaps about the freshman 15. Well, you can do the freshman 50 when you have endless supplies of food. And these days in the dorms, you will find that the food is actually very, very, very good, as opposed to when I went. But those are some of the things that the kids are thinking about. Finances and debt. How am I going to maintain a lifestyle? And how much am I adding to my debt when I get out of college? How much will I owe? What kind of financial burden am I placing upon my parents or my grandparents or my caregivers? Homesickness. Now, even if they are living at home, they will feel pangs of wanting to return to something familiar. Again, when we talked about brain compatible learning, we talked about familiarity, and we talked about feeling, embracing the familiar. So all of this excitement is great, but we also long for the warmth of home. So they may not tell you this, but as parents and as caregivers and as grandparents and aunts and uncles and siblings, you can probably tell in their voices when they talk to you. Getting organized. The amount of work can be staggering. I will tell you, at a university, you do not have faculty who talk to one another about how much work they are giving out. They may as well be the only faculty on the campus. So there's a lot of work. Getting organized can be troublesome, especially for those who didn't have to be in high school and be successful. And personal responsibility. Now you are responsible for when you leave, when you get home, what you eat. That there's a lot going on there. So even though they may not be telling you, these are things on their mind. This includes choice of majors. And one of the things that's very hard for some kids when they come into college during their first 2 years, they find out that what they've decided they want to do for the rest of their life, they absolutely hate it. And they feel sort of stressed about doing something that they may not like or changing majors. Now, one of the things that's important to know, that whatever majors that your sons or daughters wind up choosing neither predicts or guarantees your future. And there are graduates who are doing jobs, or people who will start off in one area of a company, for example, and find out that they don't want to do that. The idea here is that college graduates, or those who are in the labor force in their 20s, will switch jobs at least once every 3 years. And the average person will change career fields. So not just jobs, but entire life's focus 2 or 3 times during their lives. I do not know. I think I know one person in my sort of circle of acquaintances who is actually doing what they set out to do and majored in it. So these 4 years are not necessarily just imparting content and knowledge, but also testing resilience and how you go about things. So we are easily paralyzed by choice, because once we're introduced to the great wide world, it's hard to decide what you want to do with the rest of your life, especially because you find out you like so much. What are some other concerns that we see among first years? Transitions. So despite the brave face, making the transition, again, it's not the challenge, it's the change. Making the transition from high school senior to college freshman, or a new entry into the workforce, there's going to be a lot of second guessing, and that will be reflected in mood. So you may find that your son or daughter is elated one day and absolutely diminished the next, and that's normal. That's absolutely normal. They're also trying to figure out new definitions of dependence and independence. So what does it mean to go to, let's say, go to a college, live at a college, and you are in charge of yourself, but when you come home, that may not be the case. So it's sort of renegotiating what somebody's role is in the family as they move from adolescence into young adulthood. And that's not exclusive to colleges or universities. That could be somebody who's doing an internship or somebody who's entered the labor force and has their own apartment or shares an apartment with a roommate, still trying to figure all of that out. Expectations and disappointments. We have a very idealized notion of what this experience should be like. And most movies do not depict the college experience as being frightening or anxiety producing or not living up to everything that it should be. So, you know, you may have a son or a daughter who just goes in sort of guns blazing and excited and wide-eyed and realizes that maybe this is not the place that they want to be. You know, maybe the faculty is not what they thought, or the entire college experience is not what they thought. Figuring out the post-secondary maze, that's not only navigating sort of the processes and procedures on campus, but also sort of better understanding being responsible for oneself, leaving the past behind. Friendships are going to change. Those people who you befriended in high school, when you come back, the relationships may not be the same, or the relationships with families may be different, and navigating those two worlds can be difficult. Things like knowing when to ask for help. We are, and you know, I think that universities are not great at supporting help-seeking behavior, although oftentimes we'll pay a lot of lip service to it. But the education system in America has always been a very sort of solitary individual pursuit. And we have kids who are moving from adolescence to young adulthood and probably may feel a degree of hesitation asking for help, even though it is readily available, not only knowing when, but knowing where to go. So certainly one of the things that you can do as parents and as caregivers is support that, support help-seeking behaviors, because that's what we are here to do. And then finding a balance. This is incredibly hard for the first 2 years, but you eventually do find a rhythm. So these first 2 years are going to be consumed with doubts. They are going to be consumed with highs and consumed with lows. And then eventually you reach sort of an equilibrium. So getting through the first 2 years is important for a number of reasons, especially because if you go to a large campus, something like one of the University of California campuses or the California State University campuses, these are kids who may find themselves in lecture halls with 500 other kids who are all sort of facing the same issues and not perhaps getting the individual attention that you might find in the last 2 years. So there's a lot going on here, of course. So I know that we are getting a little bit short on time, and we're going to continue this next week. But one of the most important things that you can do is stay connected. And I mean loosely connected. I don't mean calling up every 15 minutes, asking how things are going. Your son or daughter wants to project confidence and enthusiasm to the outside world. So putting on what you might call a brave face, or letting people know that they're doing just fine because everybody else on campus or in the office or in the experience seems to be doing just fine, and they want to project that as well. But staying loosely tethered to you and their life before tertiary education or post-high school experience is important. Just knowing that you're there and that you care is a huge thing, although they probably will not tell you. Stay in touch, not all the time. Again, not calling every 15 minutes, not calling every day, but the small text that you send, to say, hey, just thinking about you, wanted to remind you of how proud we are of you, or that we love you. Sending an email, a care package from home means everything in the world, and not just to students. So when I completed university and I was, in my first job, it was absolutely an incredibly stressful experience. I didn't know if I had done the right thing, but knowing that there was somewhere that I could go, somebody who I could pick up the phone and talk to, and knowing that somebody was thinking about me, even though I didn't rely on it all the time, it made an incredible difference. So what I want to do is just talk to you a little bit about the unique concerns of first generation students, because a lot of our students are first generation students. My parents were first generation students. And there are concerns that are unique to them. And of course, we will continue this on next week as we go from years 1 and 2 to years 3 and 4. But when we talk about first generation students, there are a lot of definitions. It's like gifted and talented. It is like, all of those things that have a multitude of definitions. But when you get right down to it, really what we're talking about are students from families in which the parents, caregivers, or quite possibly siblings do not possess four-year degrees is the common definition, although there are a lot of nuances, including intersectionality with demographic, linguistic, and socioeconomic statuses. A lot of it has to do with navigating barriers. And we in higher education are not the best at being welcoming sometimes, or helping people unravel the Gordian knot that is our education system. So within higher education, there are sort of a lot of code words and procedures and cultural tendencies that are unique to post-secondary education, that if you were not familiar with them, it's much harder to navigate. And this becomes incredibly important because first generation students are now about 30% of enrollments on college campuses. Earlier on, they estimates put it as closer to 50%. And that is absolutely wonderful. But what we have to do as post-secondary institutions or as internship programs is we have to be very conscious about the way that we support these students. And here's some things that some findings from research on first generation college students versus continuing generation college students. So for example, that would be me. My parents were first generation college students and I continued that tradition. And what we find is that there is a higher percentage of first generation college students who used financial aid services. A lower percentage of first generation students use student health services. A lower percentage used academic advising services. Neither group made much use of career advising services during the freshman year, which actually makes a lot of sense. But the idea here is that there are issues that are unique to first generation college students. We will talk about those in our next session, as well as take a look at things like when your child comes home for break. So, now they're staying out all night, and that's not the arrangement you had when you were in high school. And how do you navigate that? How do you navigate difficult conversations and concerns, especially when they are there with you? And how do you become better aware of campus resources that are available to you? How do you better understand what they are going through? So in our next session, we're going to finish out years 1 and 2. Then we're going to talk about years 3 and 4, where a better sense of balance is being found. And then the process starts all over again. So I will then ask Mr. Dominguez and Mrs. Simmons, and I don't know if Mrs. Delgado is here, but to come back so we can answer a question or two.
So thank you very much, Dr. Appel, for this. I actually, when you were going through your presentation, I recall a lot of the things that happened to me. I'm a first generation college student. So a lot of the things that you were mentioning is something that I went through. And I think you made a really good point that picking the school that you believe, in their values is really important thing because you're going to be attached to that school after you graduate. And if you enjoyed your years in college, it's going to not only bring lifelong relationships with your professors as well as your fellow students, but also with the university as well. So I think that's really important. We don't have too many questions. There was one question regarding if we can actually provide a list of technical schools, I believe,
Yeah.
the trade schools that are in California.
Hmm.
We will put that on our website for sure. I believe it's already in there, but we will make sure that if it's not, that it's on there. But we did get a lot of guesses regarding the actual background that you
Ah,
have.
okay. So let's hear them. What did we get?
All right, so let me start with the very first one. We have Miss Nydia, who said it was Calton Hill. She also guessed the University of Edinburgh. Calton
Okay.
Hill are the seven hills, I believe that's what you mentioned.
Well, she was absolutely right
Okay.
with the second. With the second. So yes, this is Scotland. So I'm going to move so you can see the panorama a little bit better. But an absolutely a stupendous guess. So yes, let's make sure that we get information for all of our winners. And Mr. Dominguez, what we will be doing is dropping by a big box of prizes that parents can pick up or find a way to get it to them. So yes, absolutely correct. Just out of curiosity, what were some of the other guesses?
We had Glasgow being one of
Yep.
them. We had Cambridge,
Yes.
Princeton. We had, I think that's it. Yeah, those were the only ones that I see on this list.
Well, very, very good. And yes, I think, I think in retrospect, as you were saying, it's easy to think about the values that your campus has. But I think, as you mentioned, it's important as you go in, really think about how these values resonate with you. It may not matter as much during your first or second year, but certainly as you move forward and you're recognized as an alumnus or an alumna from the school, it's going to make all the difference in the world. So I look forward to seeing everybody again next Tuesday. And for those of you watching from home, again, thank you, Mr. Dominguez, Ms. Simmons, Ms. Martinez, and Ms. Delgado. If you're here, thank you all for being such fantastic hosts.
Thank you, Dr. Apa, and we'll see each other next week for our last session of this theme that we're doing this fall semester. But we will be coming back after that with other topics as well as we move along in the year. Thank you very much, Dr. Apa, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.